Congress went home early this week for the Thanksgiving break, not because they'd done their work, but because they couldn't get their work done. After House Speaker Mike Johnson successfully passed a measure to keep the government funded, he had hoped to continue working, but members of his own conference blocked a routine procedure to open floor debate, saying they had, quote, had enough. The new speaker has only been in office 23 days after spending 22 days without a speaker, and already members have had enough. So where is all of this going here? To help us understand, I'm joined by Philip Wallach. He is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, focusing on Congress and congressional reform. So it took 22 days to pick a new speaker. Mike Johnson voted against the last speaker's deal with Democrats, but now he has successfully passed similar legislation to keep the government running. That has upset his members, which has led to this event before Thanksgiving. Help us understand what's going on.
Sure. So the fundamental question is, how much difference does it make who the speaker is, after all? I think the folks that threw Kevin McCarthy out of his job hoped that bringing in a true conservative, one of their own, Mike Johnson, would change everything about the dynamics in the House. But the votes are still the votes. And it turns out Republicans, with their very slim majority in the House, have a hard time agreeing themselves to get around to a majority. And so, given that we have must-pass legislation that not only has to get through the House, but also through the Senate and get President Biden's signature, the Speaker really doesn't have that much choice but to seek a broader coalition.
Yeah. So is the mindset of those who have said they had enough, the Freedom Caucus, or many of them in it, is it essentially at odds with the institution that they are a part of? In other words, they believe that somehow there is some legislation that can get 217 votes from Republicans in the House and then magically somehow get it through the democratically controlled Senate and White House. I mean, is that just an unrealistic view given the legislature they're a part of?
I think that they want somehow a show of will that will just change our political moment entirely. And they think that by picking the right fight and being fierce enough in prosecuting it, that everything might change. And if we're not picking enough fights, we'll never find out. But at the end of the day, the Speaker feels an institutional responsibility to get spending bills passed, to keep the lights on for the federal government. That's an understandable position. Really, nobody sitting in the Speaker's chair is probably going to feel so different about that. And so Mr. Johnson makes a very similar deal to what Mr. McCarthy made a few months back.
So I want to switch to the larger institutional question. You wrote a book called Why Congress? And essentially the argument, as I remember it, is that Congress is the perfect place to work through partisan challenges. It's meant to, if it's working correctly, handle lots of diverse ideas and shuttle everything towards a conclusion. What is keeping that from happening? And if you could wave the magic wand, what would you do to change it?
Well, Congress in recent years has been a very partisan body where each side is maybe centrally concerned about making the other side look bad. And both the House and the Senate have been very top-down institutions where somehow the leader is expected to tee everything up in the perfect way for his side or her side. Nancy Pelosi was, of course, a very successful speaker in that role. I think the problem is that we've lost a sense of factional interplay where the different groups of members don't always just fall back on their party line seeking partisan advantage, but actually try to figure out how to solve the American people's problems, how to come together and, maybe find some strange bedfellows that are supposed to be the stuff of politics. We've lost the knack for that. That just isn't how our Congress has worked in recent years, but it has worked that way farther in the past and sort of has the potential to work that way again if we can make the shift and evolve institutionally.
Which would require a speaker probably having to make that kind of shift or leading to that kind of new way of doing things. I want to ask you one kind of question about the body itself as the last question. This was a week of members of Congress behaving badly on both the House and the Senate side. And there's this George Santos ethics report. This all gets a lot of coverage. The bad actors do. Is there an institutional cost to that obsessive focus with the antics of a few members? Because the theory would be everybody looks at Congress, thinks, oh, it's defined by these, 3 people acting out. The whole body's that way. Why do we care about Congress? And it loses all of its legitimacy because of the obsession on the behavior of a few.
I mean, Congress has always had its workhorses and its show horses, and probably always will. So there's nothing to do to solve that problem. That's just going to be part of the nature of the institution. But we do have a situation now where the show horses seem to get rewarded for really perverse behavior and sort of following the rewards of internet virality leads to especially bad incentives. So we need to find ways to redesign Congress to reward the folks who are willing to put their nose to the grindstone and get things done on policy. We need to reprioritize committees for that to happen. Right now, committees have kind of been crowded out by this powerful top-down speaker role. Committees are really the place where the workhorses can shine.
Philip Wallach, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.